Jung's deepest ideas, the Anima, Individuation, Synchronicity, find their truest home not in mainstream cinema, but in its dark, forgotten corners. The films that were too disturbing, too strange, or too quiet to enter the canon. Today, I'm going to show you 7 of them. None of them are on that famous list. All of them have been analyzed in serious Jungian academic literature. And none of them get the attention they deserve. Let's start.
Pendant toute ma vie, j'ai eu l'impression d'être à la fois ici et ailleurs.
The Double Life of Veronique, 1991, Kieślowski. 2 women, same face, same voice, same heart. One lives in Poland, the other in France. They never speak, but when one dies on stage in the middle of a concert, the other, hundreds of miles away, is overcome by a grief she cannot explain. Jung called it synchronicity, a meaningful coincidence, 2 events connected not by cause, but by significance. For Jung, this wasn't mysticism. It was evidence that the psyche extends beyond the individual skull, that somewhere beneath personal consciousness, there's a deeper layer where minds touch across distance, where one person's death can ripple through another person's body. Kieślowski's film shows synchronicity not as an event, but as a condition of being. Every choice Veronique makes is shaped by a life she never lived, the life of a woman she never met. This is what Jung meant by the self, not the ego, not the personality, but the totality of who you are, including the parts that exist outside your awareness. The self contains your unlived lives, what later Jungians like James Hollis would call the lives that died, so this one could survive. Jung wrote his major essay on synchronicity in 1952. 40 years later, Kieślowski made a film that lives inside that essay. Whether he knew Jung's name or not, Veronique mourns Veronica without knowing her name, because on some level she knows. She is mourning herself.
Oh, this is the smell of him.
The Reflecting Skin, 1990, Philip Ridley. A boy stands alone in an Idaho wheat field. The wheat is too golden. The sun is too bright. His brother is wasting away. The widow down the road, he has decided, is a vampire, and nothing the adults tell him makes the horror stop. Under the horror, the film is doing something Jung wrote about for years. The moment a child first encounters evil, with no framework to understand it. Jung believed the shadow is not born inside us. It is deposited by our parents, by our culture, by every adult who told us a feeling we had was wrong. The child meets the shadow not as part of themselves, but as something terrifying outside. A vampire, a monster, a neighbor. In Marie-Louise von Franz's writing on fairy tales, this is the recurring pattern. The child cannot integrate what they have seen, so they project it. Seth genuinely believes Dolphin Blue is a vampire because the alternative is too unbearable. The alternative is that adults can be wounded, sexual, dying, and still kind. Ridley shoots it all in oversaturated gold like a memory that won't sit still. The wheat fields are biblical. The blood is alchemical. The toad they inflate in the opening minutes is a perfect image of what happens to a child's psyche when it tries to hold what it cannot yet hold. The loss of innocence is not a single moment, but a long unraveling. The reflecting skin is what that unraveling looks like when the camera refuses to look away. Hour of the Wolf, 1968, Ingmar Bergman. A painter and his pregnant wife move to a remote island. He cannot sleep. Night after night, he sits awake, sketching the demons that visit him in the hours between midnight and dawn. His wife begins to see them too. the closest Bergman ever came to making a horror film, and one of the most direct films ever made about what Jung called the encounter with the shadow. Jung believed the shadow is everything we have refused to be, the cruelty we suppressed, the desire we denied, and the moment we stop running from it, the shadow doesn't stay abstract. It takes form. It walks into the room. It speaks. Johann Borg's demons, the Birdman, the meat-eaters, the lady with a hat whose face comes off with it, are not random horrors. Each one is a fragment of Johann he could not face, his shame, his violence, his sexual transgressions. Jung argued that the encounter with the shadow is the first stage of individuation, but those who cannot integrate the shadow are consumed by it. Johann does not survive his demons, not because they are evil, but because he never learned to recognize them as his own.
I will not be here that long, nor did I expect to be, but it is a loud world, and this is an island.
Spider, 2002, David Cronenberg. A man arrives in London, fresh out of a mental institution. He mutters to himself. He wears 4 shirts at once. He fills a notebook with symbols only he can read. Then he begins to remember. Ralph Fiennes plays Dennis Clegg, a schizophrenic who returns to the streets of his childhood and watches, as a ghost, his younger self piece together the day his mother died. Cronenberg doesn't film memory as flashback. He films it as active imagination, the technique Jung developed during his own confrontation with the unconscious, beginning in 1913. Active imagination, in Jung's words, is dreaming with open eyes. You concentrate on a fragment and let it move on its own. You watch the figures of your unconscious act out their drama, and you stay present with them. Adult Spider does exactly this. He stands in the corner of his childhood kitchen, watching the boy he was. He follows his mother to the pub. He scribbles his findings in a script no one else can read. The truth. Spider's whole web of memory is built to hide. It was never his father who killed his mother. It was him. The film is about a psyche that cannot integrate, and so it spins, endlessly, the same web, looking for a center it has already lost.
The strange thing is, I don't think myself silent. That is because of my piano.
The Piano, 1993, Jane Campion. An electively mute Scottish woman arrives on a beach in colonial New Zealand with her young daughter and her most prized possession, a piano. The piano is left behind on the sand. The film never quite recovers from this image. Winner of 3 Academy Awards and the Palme d'Or, and yet the film's deepest layer is something almost no one talks about, a study of the Jungian shadow. Jungian analyst Mary Dougherty devoted an entire chapter to this film in Jung and Film II. Ada has chosen silence. As a child, she simply stopped speaking. Jungians would say her voice has been pushed into the shadow, the place where everything we cannot live publicly goes to wait. She has found a second voice. She speaks through the piano. Her music is everything she cannot say. Her rage, her desire, her grief, her erotic life. When her husband leaves the piano on the beach, he doesn't realize what he has done. He has tried to silence what was already silent. The shadow doesn't tolerate that. It moves into the body of another man, Baines, and begins to speak through him. The cost is brutal. Ada loses a finger, nearly drowns, almost chooses death over integration. But she emerges from the water changed, whole in a way she could never have been before. Jung wrote that individuation always passes through the shadow. There is no other way. The piano is what it looks like when a human being finally walks that road, not in metaphor, not in dream, but in flesh, water, and music.
What are you doing?
I'm looking at my wife.
Birth, 2004, Jonathan Glazer. A man jogs through a snowy Central Park. He passes under a bridge. He collapses. He dies. 10 years later, his widow Anna is finally about to remarry. At her mother's birthday party, a 10-year-old boy slips into the apartment unnoticed. He looks at her and says calmly, "I am Sean. I am your husband." This is Birth. Directed by Jonathan Glazer in 2004, the film he made between Sexy Beast and Under the Skin. It opened to mixed reviews and quietly disappeared. It is also one of the most psychologically precise films ever made about grief. Jungian analysts John Izod and Joanna Dovalis devoted an entire chapter to this film in Jung and Film II, later expanded into the opening chapter of Cinema as Therapy. Their argument is precise. Birth is not a film about reincarnation. It is a film about what happens when grief is not allowed to complete its work. Jung wrote that mourning is not a feeling, but a process, a slow descent into the unconscious, where the dead must be properly released. When that descent is interrupted, the dead don't disappear. They remain inside us as a complex, autonomous, alive, waiting to return. This is exactly what walks through Anna's door. The boy is not, literally, her dead husband. He is the form her unfinished grief has taken. Her psyche has produced him because her conscious life refused to. She is about to marry a man she does not love, and her unconscious sends a messenger to stop her. The film's most famous scene is 3 minutes of nothing but Nicole Kidman's face at the opera. She does not speak. She does not move. The camera simply watches her psyche split open in real time. It is what Jung called being seized by a complex. The moment something buried takes the wheel. Possession, 1981, Andrzej Żuławski. A woman walks into an empty subway tunnel in West Berlin. She is alone. She begins to laugh. The laugh becomes a scream. She convulses, drops to her knees, and bleeds. A miscarriage made cosmic, the camera refusing to cut away. This is Possession, made in 1981 by Polish director Andrzej Żuławski. The performance, Isabelle Adjani, gives Cost her something real. She attempted suicide after filming Wrapped, and won Best Actress at Cannes for the same role. On the surface, Possession is about a marriage falling apart. Mark, an intelligence officer, returns home to find his wife Anna wants a divorce. What she doesn't tell him is that she has been doing something else, alone in a hidden apartment that has everything to do with another man. One she is creating from nothing. Jung wrote that what we cannot accept in those we love, we begin to manufacture in our own unconscious. The animus in a woman takes form. And if the marriage is dying, that form turns monstrous. Mark, meanwhile, meets a teacher named Helen, green-eyed, gentle, played by the same actress. She is his anima projection. The International Association of Analytical Psychology defines possession this way. When the ego cannot project the shadow but identifies with it, the shadow is acted out. Possession films exactly this, until there is nothing left of either partner. Just two people who never met the human being on the other side of the bed. 7 films, 7 mirrors. Jung said we don't read symbols, symbols read us. If you watched these films and felt something you cannot name, that is not the film. That is the part of you the film just woke up. Thank you for watching.